Hey everyone, welcome to the Endgame podcast where I bet you didn't know what you didn't know. I'm Dr. Ryan Wakeham, successful entrepreneur and your Endgame coach. Today I'm welcoming a very special guest as we start season 2 of our podcast. We have Greg Kuhn with us today, who's going to talk to us about manifestation. So sit back, relax, enjoy the podcast as we speak about Believe It to Achieve It, the science of manifestation with Greg Kuhn. So, Greg, I'm going to bring you into the podcast here. Welcome. Thank you for joining again as we enter into the new year. The new year, new me, right? This is a common phrase. And part of the new us or me is we're starting a season 2. And we're super excited to have you as our first guest of the year. And really excited, you know my background as a psychiatrist. I'm super excited to be talking about the concept of manifestation. So anyway, I'll turn it over to you for a brief introduction. We'll take it from there.
Well, thank you, Dr. Wakeham. Hello to everybody. I'm really excited to help you kick off season 2. How cool is that to get to be guest number 1? There aren't too many times in life where we get to be number 1. So it's wonderful. And I'm really pleased and excited to be joining you this morning.
Yeah, perfect. Well, we'll dive right in here. So, you have done a lot of work. I know you have a background in quantum physics, and so you're a scientist by trade. And one of the things, or I would say the thing for you, is this concept of manifestation. And clearly, again, as I said, I'm a psychiatrist. I kind of scientist of the mind, so to speak. And I am a firm believer, if you've heard anything I've done in the past, I'm a huge believer and talk a lot about the idea of mindset and how setting the right mindset is so important to getting what you want out of life, whether that's, personally or professionally. And so when, I stumbled across you and your podcast and your book and all the information you put out there around manifestation, I thought it was a perfect number 1 guest for season 2. So anyway, I'm super intrigued by what you have to say. And to kick it off, for you, maybe how did you stumble upon manifestation in your lifetime?
Perfect question to kick us off. I do want to say, Dr. Wakeham, that I'm not actually a scientist by training. I'm a historian. And my interest in science, it evolved from my love of history. In fact, science has always been, for me, my favorite topic to explore, primarily because science has played such a tremendous role in forming the paradigms by which we in 2024, I'm going to guess by the time folks are listening to this or watching this. Well, let me back up. A paradigm, for those who have not encountered the word before, that's a phrase coined by Thomas Kuhn, no relation, in the late 60s. It is a fancy word for the reasons we do things the way we do them. And we, for students of history, for folks that have been to school before, we've all heard of the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution was the birth of Newtonian physics, which predated quantum physics. And Newtonian physics did such a fantastic job of explaining the workings of the natural world. Newtonian physics gave us adages that are so important to us, such as for every action, there's an equal and an opposite reaction. We're all familiar with those types of things. Newtonian physics, it gave us the ability to create the modern Western world. And more than that, or equal to that, it gave us paradigms that we base how we live upon. Dr. Wakeham, you are a psychiatrist. And so I know that you're very familiar with Dr. Sigmund Freud. And Dr. Freud, to my knowledge, not knowingly, based talk therapy on the new paradigms from Newtonian physics. Sigmund Freud, by the time he was practicing medicine, Newtonian physics had been part of society long enough that these paradigms had seeped in, and he took advantage of a Newtonian paradigm known as deconstruction that says, well, certainly if we look back at our childhood and our life leading up to this point, we can identify antecedents that contribute to, our inability to function as we want in the world. So we're going to go back and we're going to look at childhood, and we're going to look at those experiences, and we're going to explore those experiences, and we're going to fix those experiences, and therefore fix our life in the present. That's deconstruction. It's also drawing from mechanism, which is another Newtonian paradigm that says that everything can be broken down into smaller and smaller and smaller components, and each component's job essentially is to contribute to the larger whole. Mechanism, for example, allows us to have, mechanism informs modern education systems, it informs industries. All of these paradigms that arose from Newtonian physics created an incredibly effective 21st century world, or a modern Western world. And we can debate, the limits of that effectiveness certainly are well apparent to most thinking people. However, they're effective enough to have allowed this. And the great thing about quantum physics is it is equally, actually, it's more of a scientific revolution than Newtonian physics was. Why? Because quantum physics is the most precise, accurate body of science that mankind has ever created and encountered. In fact, we are peeling back, if you will, the veil on the tiniest portions of life, as well as the grandest portions of life. And that's really what quantum physics covers. But quantum physics gives us some incredibly more effective tools for living. And that is essentially how I got into manifesting. You might say I was given the gift of desperation back in 2006. I found myself, it was June 2006, in a picture. You've spent the last 5 years working your rear end off on a business, obviously designed to provide wealth and other resources to me and my family. Instead, what happened is, in June of 2006, I got a phone call that I had been dreading from my attorney. And she said, Greg, I can give you about 6 more months, of holding off the creditors. And I knew that meant that I was about 6 months away from $1 million of debt, 15 foreclosures, bankruptcy. Oh, and I should mention that right at this time, my wife left, moved 2 states away. And I was suddenly a single father of 3 young boys aged 10, 8, and 5, almost overnight. So I really, unless I wanted to give up, raise a white flag, surrender, and just accept that I was going to be that guy for the rest of my life, the guy who ruined everything for everyone, I didn't have any choice but to seek some radical solutions. And I looked to quantum physics to provide them.
There's no better story than that. You learn, I guess, when you've lived it, right? In my experience, when you've lived it, that is what part of what makes you an expert in it, right? And so even though maybe not by trade, you're not a scientist, certainly by voice you are. And, thank you for the ride down memory lane of Newtonian physics, because I can't say I've done that for quite some time, since probably college. But it is, even though we come from different backgrounds and trades, we are effectively speaking the same language, in that, you grew up through, as a historian, but again, in the scientific realm, through, physics, Newtonian, and then quantum, which brought you to that moment of desperation. And then what are you going to do about it, right? And living that. I grew up through, Freud, certainly, who had his own take on deconstruction and Newtonian physics, but the realm of neuroscience and what synapses connect to what, and how do we create a neurochemical environment for success. And that's where I think our 2 paths shall cross, meaning this idea of manifestation, right? And so we know that scientifically, brain chemistry wise, that if you were to close your eyes and envision yourself succeeding in doing something, that the same areas of your brain will light up as if you actually did it, right? So if you think about Tiger Woods in his prime, sitting behind a putt, crouching behind the putt and kind of looking at the line, so to speak, what he was doing is he was envisioning the ball going in the hole. right? And so in that moment, his brain was actually lighting up the same muscle areas, the same vision areas, the same pleasure areas that would have happened had he actually made the putt. And then lo and behold, he makes the putt. And so there's clear neurochemical science behind this idea of manifestation and what it means. To you, it means something very different because you came, through a period of despair to really come to this. And yeah, I read one of your blogs about this, one of your posts around it. And I remember you saying something along the lines of, when you're in that moment of despair, to your point, you could raise a white flag and give up. And I often deal with patients who have raised the white flag and given up on a reactive basis. Or you can look within and really dive deep and create the ecosystem and the mindset for success. And that, again, through your eyes is this process of manifestation. So tell me a little bit more about how you went from that moment of despair to kind of an inward empowerment and subsequent manifestation of, where you are today and the successes you've had.
Absolutely. The foundational principle here that I set forth upon is a very clear notion from quantum physics that everything in our material world is a different perspective of the same thing. So on a quantum level, we are actually all the same thing. We are energy. We are not made of energy. We haven't abandoned our energy state. We are still energy right now. We're having a macro experience. We are an energy field that is having a local experience. And all that I see as I look around my room right now while I talk to you, all that I see is just a different perspective of me. So where I began was from this very curious perspective that me was awful. I mean, me as in the results of my footwork, the outcome of my efforts, these horrible situations that were comprising my life and I was now facing. Now, fortunately, when it comes to science, we've never had to wait for scientists to sanction or anoint or tell us it's okay to go ahead and experiment and try or implement ideas from science in our life, because that's what I began to do. I realized that indeed, Dr. Wakeham, we are the source of all of this. And there's quite a bit in that we can find in quantum physics that is a very strong indicator that we are the hearth. Think of a human as almost a fulcrum upon which a reality is generated. A human being has the capacity. In fact, it's more than having the capacity. We can't unhave this capacity. All humans manifest a unique version of reality in each moment of their life. You, Dr. Wakeham, are collapsing the one field of energy. Sometimes we call that the quantum field. We can call it, perhaps people are more comfortable calling it God. It's certainly the one field of energy from which all of this is manifest, has some of the very same characteristics that one would attribute to God. This one field of energy is alive, it's omnipresent, it's omniscient. All information is shared instantaneously throughout the entirety of it. It also has the capacity and the capability to become anything. So in that sense, the reality that I manifest is subjective. Now, it's subjective because I am the one manifesting it. It's also subjective because I can change what I manifest. Scientifically speaking, I can change what I manifest. What I teach people to do is to scientifically manifest their reality more intentionally. And it becomes, actually, it's a little difficult for it not to work. We can lean a little bit on another body of science. We can look at systems theory, and we can understand that when you change a system, the system's environment changes automatically. You don't have to make that happen. Well, you know very well as a scientist yourself that humans are incredibly complex systems. Actually, we are a system of systems. So when we change ourselves, being the hearth of reality, being the source of what is manifest, we automatically change the external life that we are perceiving, experiencing, and manifesting. And what better way to manifest a different life than to change the source of what we're manifesting? You work with patients, Dr. Wakeham. You know that it's always best to utilize a protocol where you can be forever in control of implementing it. And when I learned to make myself a better manifester, biologically, psychologically, physiologically, and as I continue to make myself a better manifester, I am automatically changing my reality because of this unique interface that we get to have with the world. Makes for quite an adventure.
Yeah. Again, there's so many things that you speak of that just, ring true to me. A couple of highlights or a couple of things that I think of when I hear you talk and things that I subscribe to as well and talked about. Those include things like I use the term BS, right? And this kind of goes back a little bit to your Freudian theory and deconstruction, but case in point, perception's reality. And we, through our own lens, see things. We perceive things through our own lens. And that lens is often, some might say clouded, some might say colored by your own, and I call it your BS, right? So your belief systems, a lot of which have been developed over time through external loci of control, right? Things have happened to you, things that have been put upon you, things that you've had to deal with internally and externally. Create your belief systems that then you view the world through. And so when you talk about manifestation in the science, whether it's the neuroscience, the biology, the physiology, the mind, it all comes back to point, how do we shape our belief systems, or how do we shape our ability to perceive the present in a way that is actually more positive? And that, to me, is the definition of manifestation, which is it is the way in which you choose to view the world, which you do have absolute control over, to your point. And there's a famous Henry Ford quote, right? So whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. That is quintessential, exactly what we're talking about, which is if you believe you can and you kind of put that belief top of mind, and by the way, you write it down, right? I'm a big believer in journaling. I'm a big believer in hopes and dreams are great, but unless you put it on paper and have a strategy behind it, you're likely going to continue to be a dreamer and not a doer. And part of the body of science I've seen around manifestation is this concept of not only will your brain light up, and not only if you believe it, you can achieve it, more vaguely, but if you believe it and it's written down and it is top of mind and it's what you choose to be and choose to do and choose to believe, you will then, whether it's kind of compounding baby steps or larger strides, actually put the actions in place to get to said endpoint, right? And I know manifestation is a never ending thing, so it doesn't have to stop, or candidly won't stop at one endpoint. And it's really the journey that we all aspire to. But again, those are key highlights of what I hear from you that I very much subscribe to, and that, my followers and I think your followers subscribe to, which is this idea that, again, as Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're going to be right, right? And I think that's clearly the undertone and the overtone of what you believe in as well. Yeah. What more would you say about it as you think about how you might guide a listener towards just being a better manifester, or maybe put a different way, manifesting in the right direction, not the wrong direction?
I love the conversation. People, Dr. Wakeham, people have called me the law of attraction science guy. I really prefer to keep it in the realm of science. For me, that works. It works. It's proven to work. And, I really like to look back to about age 7 or 8 years old. That's the age that humans start to be able to discern. They start to be able to make decisions and develop skills to sift through the information they're being given. Prior to that, however, when we didn't have that ability, we took everything in like a sponge absorbing water without concern for whether what we're taking in is going to serve us. So those messages, that information that we took in as children, as young children, beginning from birth, primarily coming from our most trusted caregivers. Those became our beliefs. They were stored in our subconscious. They remain in our subconscious, the most primitive part of our brain. And of course, I'm not proposing to speak from your specialty, but our subconscious, for those watching, obviously means we don't have conscious access to it. Well, our beliefs, as you mentioned, our beliefs are that fulcrum. Our beliefs are what manifest our life. They manifest the form, the function, the meaning, and the value of everything that we create, everything we manifest. So as we go out into our adult lives, we are experiencing a life that is manifest largely, 90 to 95% of it manifest from those beliefs that we inherited. We didn't choose them. And as well-intentioned as our most trusted caregivers were, and they were certainly making their best efforts to pass along important, useful information that would become our beliefs. Ultimately, they could only pass along that which they themselves inherited. So there's no doubt that every human is going to sail into adulthood harboring inherited beliefs that are going to prove themselves incapable of manifesting versions of life that align with our true desires for them. Now, quantum physics says something very clearly to me, and it's borne itself out in practice for almost 2 decades in my own life and in the lives of my clients and associates. And that is that we are not responsible for the bad things that we're manifesting. Now, realize that's a radical statement. I'm not suggesting that we don't bear responsibility for who we are, the actions we take, the way we live our lives, but we are experiencing a life manifest by beliefs we had no say-so over inheriting. So as an adult, and as I encounter parts of my life that are not aligned with my desires for them, I'm probably going to be prone to try new actions. And sometimes those actions are effective. But I want to highlight, by the way, when those actions aren't effective, that often reinforces my misguided belief that I am to blame. Now it's doubled because my actions didn't work. My new actions didn't work. Well, I want to let people off the hook even more by saying that the results of our actions are also manifested by those inherited beliefs we carry into each moment. So ultimately, if we want to manifest a part of our lives more akin to our desires for them or for it, it's incumbent. In fact, it's imperative. It's absolutely necessary for me to change my beliefs. I can't manifest different versions of reality without changing my beliefs. Now, I do want to say one of the myths about manifesting is that there are limits to what I can manifest differently, what part of my life I can manifest differently. It's also a myth that some parts of my life, that's out of the realm of manifestation. I can't touch that part of my life. The only limit to the parts of one's life that one can manifest differently is your desire and your willingness to change your beliefs. Now, I say this because, life gets painful. And certainly it's during these painful times, these less than satisfying, these frustrating, unfulfilling experiences that we have, that we are manifesting, of course. Sometimes those occur in parts of our life where changing my beliefs isn't going to radically alter the physical construct of reality. For example, we had a beloved pet dog that ran away. We lost it. This was a few years ago. Well, there are no beliefs that I'm aware of. There are no ways to radically change my own beliefs to the extent that I can manifest a reality where my dog never ran away, or my parent never died, or I didn't get an F on the term paper, or I didn't get a divorce, all these sorts of things. However, hypothetically, theoretically, those limits don't exist, not on a quantum level, but here on a macro level, I don't know how to make the truly fantastic. I don't know how to defy the components of life, such as life and death and time and distance, all these dimensional constructs that govern our day-to-day existence. But what I have learned is that in parts of my life that are integral to my fulfillment as a human being, I can have a incredible impact. And I'm talking about those really hard to reach areas, health, wealth, fitness, love, family, career, these parts of our lives that wind up being not only the perfect opportunities for us to be the person that we want to be and manifest the life that we want to manifest, but there are also the parts of our lives where, and I don't know about you, I think this is a universal thing I'm about to say, those hard to reach areas of life that I just mentioned and ones like them, I have never had any success pretending to care less about my success there. And that's ultimately where I live. It's where my books live. It's where my coaching lives, all the other things that I do to try to make it hard not to encounter this information.
Yeah, I think first of all, I would agree with you on that last point, in that if you aren't putting your energy and you aren't working on your perception and manifestation in those core areas, you're likely not living your best self, and you're probably distracted in all the wrong places. A really good way to kind of put yourself back in the right direction, so to speak. I wanted to speak on a couple of other things you mentioned that just, again, strike me. You mentioned your ability to discern information as you kind of hit 7, 8, 9 years old, and then how you inherit beliefs in the meantime. And no truer words have been spoken. Again, we know from a brain model perspective that, especially for things that are highly memorable or notably impactful to someone, we've been able to establish that memories can be formed as early as, a year old, sometimes even less. I mean, we know for a fact by year 3 to 4, you're consolidating and keeping memories. And again, oftentimes earlier. So there is clearly, to your point, there's 5 years plus in some instances, if not more, you are receiving information and storing information, but you're not able to discern that information. And so belief systems are absolutely built off of a foundation of many years of information that you had no ability to filter. And so that is, again, scientifically 100% accurate, and oftentimes what shapes our initial belief systems. Now, to your point, one of the parts of manifestation is you can do something about it, right? That we're not kind of stuck with what we inherited, although that doesn't mean there won't be work involved and a lot of intention needed to circumvent, crush, overcome. But certainly we are handed a set of belief systems that we have to learn to either work with or work around over time. But I think the theories that you bring to the table and the scientific and just eloquence behind which you bring around the concept of manifestation is so important to humanity, to your point. And the final point I would make is you mentioned kind of there's dimensional constructs that we probably shouldn't necessarily get into today. I actually start my podcast every time with you don't know what you don't know, right? And that can be, you can put that on top of almost anything. And I would say, in my experience around this idea of believe it, achieve it, manifestation, etc., that because of certain confines or constructs, you may not yet know that even something exists, right? So that you can certainly over time tap into that, and you could take things that you don't know and put them in the bucket of you don't know it, and then eventually bring it into the bucket of you know it. But that obviously takes experiences, that takes intention, that takes empowerment, and that takes time. So what you may not be able to manifest today, I think maybe what a good way to put it would be, what you may not be able to manifest today doesn't mean you won't be able to manifest it at some point in time. You just haven't yet kind of tapped into that energy source or that belief system.
Can I add something?
Sure.
I love what you're saying. In my latest book, I have a section where I talk about you're already manifesting your desire, right? If my desire is to have a more fit body and I don't like the look of it, I don't like the feel of it, I don't like the functionality of it. So I embark on some best practices to bring about, to manifest that. I like to say that I'm already manifesting my fit body. I'm just not doing it as well as I will eventually, right? And in fact, one of the things that, you were mentioning, journaling at the beginning of our conversation. I do a live every Thursday at noon on my Facebook page. And tomorrow is a Thursday. My live tomorrow is about opportunity journaling. And when you talk about, I saw that tagline, I'll bet you don't know what you don't know. Well, by the way, that's a great bet if you can get anyone to accept that, because it's always true. How could I know what I don't know? That's a great line. I love that. And for me, well, I'll just say this. I'll keep it simple. I am wrong all the time. Wrong in the sense that I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. How could I have? So I'm experiencing an outcome that I wasn't expecting, or maybe even was unwanted. Well, I didn't know that was going to occur. And, what I don't know, I like to learn that I don't know something. I love the simplest solutions possible. There's a scientific adage known as Occam's razor, that the simplest solution is always the best solution. And so, in fact, the utopia for me is when someone comes up and says, hey, dummy, all you had to do was press that button. Well, there's a second where I'm going to think, why didn't I know that, for just a moment. And then I remember, oh, wait a minute. I love a simple solution. Thank you. That's great. I'm glad I was so dumb that the solution was so simple. Who knew? We can find gratitude anywhere, right? And that is, to your point, those responses and approaches to life are learned with intentionality, with intention, and with good guidance. Not only can we change our beliefs, but we can learn new ways of interacting with the world. Dr. Wakeham, I'm sure you wouldn't disagree with this statement, that in some parts of my life, I want extraordinary experiences. I want intimacy with a soulmate. I want a mentor relationship with my sons. I want financial success in my career. These and other, I want a fit body. These are extraordinary experiences. They're places where we tend to already be expending the most effort because they are the most important to us. They also happen to be the parts of our lives that generate the most frustration and the greatest lack of fulfillment because of the importance of our desires for them. It's not only are these areas of our life ripe for us to change by changing ourselves, they're also a place we're already used to getting in and, rolling up our sleeves and getting some work done, if you will. Now, the good news, if I can throw this in the quantum world, there is no such thing as cause and effect. That's a new paradigm that turns Newtonian physics on its head. Cause and effect isn't a real thing in the quantum world, but it's a very real thing in the macro world. So we can take that information and we can say to ourselves, that's interesting. There is nothing that I need to do to make anything else happen. On a fundamental level, that is a true statement. However, there are often things I need to do to make myself believe that something can happen. And nothing can happen that I don't believe. In fact, I'm 56 years old. If you're watching this, I hope you think, hey, he looks pretty good for 56. That's, my intent, toot my own horn here. But I do a lot. I'm very physically fit. I run regularly. I drink a gallon of water every day. I eat very healthily. I get good sleep. I do lots of things like that. I'm going to say something. It might either sound radical or too simple, but it's so true. And it really speaks to the importance of changing our life by changing ourselves, changing the reality we manifest by changing our beliefs. And that is my running, my drinking water, my eating habits, my sleep habits. Those things don't manifest my health and fitness. Those things create beliefs. They allow me to believe that I can manifest fitness, and therefore I do. So yeah, definitely on a macro level, there absolutely are things that we need to, and that's part of the key, isn't it? Is finding those things with a degree of emotional honesty and utilizing our reality as a feedback loop to let us know if we're headed in the right direction.
I would say what that reminds me of is this idea of you, and this goes back to actually part of what you said earlier, which is, you can really turn yourself in the right direction on an idea of manifestation in a period of despair. But if you're willing to be more intentional and more proactive and be in tune to energies and beliefs and how they might be impacting your life, you will, and candidly, as we both know, that's a lot of what having a coach or a mentor is all about, which is being able to change the inflection point and do something much quicker, right? You can get to that manifested endpoint in a completely different way if you do it at the guidance of someone who could be a coach or a mentor. And so, but that requires you to, agree to be mentored or to be coached. That requires you to be intentional with your energy and your time. And it requires you to be in tune to your belief systems and what is, perception is reality, but what could reality be? And those are all mindset shifts for, the general population. I would say those are mindset shifts that they have to overcome over time, because again, many of their inherited belief systems don't really allow them to tap into those energies or those thoughts, or those new, maybe improved beliefs. And so this is where I think what we do as mentors and coaches becomes so important, and how we can really change someone's path much more quickly towards a proactive, positive mindset and the subsequent manifestation as compared to the opposite. So I think, everything you've had to say has been very validating for me, and what you bring to the table is a kind of a different path to, as I said, a very similar endpoint. Maybe in the last few minutes, I know you do have a new book. I think you have a few books actually. So maybe if you want to put a shout out to that new book and what it really talks about, what the listeners might get from it, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thanks for the invitation to do that. Let me put on my top hat and start singing my song. Now, I love to talk about my work. Dr. Wakeham, I had a thought. The book behind me is my 9th book. It's actually is a recent release. It's September of 2023. So it's still a pretty new baby out there in the world. I love all my babies. I use the term baby because the delivery process is excruciating. But in a good way, right? I mean, I start with a block of marble and I have to remove everything that's not the book. I don't know if that was Leonardo da Vinci who said that, but somebody, very famous artist, used that analogy. For folks who would love to take a dive into what Dr. Wakeham and I are discussing, obviously more of my pathway, although certainly our pathways are headed in the same direction. What you're going to get a peek into is an explanation of what a human is, how a human manifests life and reality, and how a human can change the manifestation of their life and reality. All 9 of my books, while they may have slightly different focuses, are all centered around empowering you to manifest versions of life, versions of reality that are much more aligned with your dreams and desires, especially in those most important parts of our lives. I tend to encounter, Dr. Wakeham, people who are very successful people. As you know, as people watching and listening know, when I experience, let's say, a marriage, as I experience more intimacy, more connection, more love and joy and fulfillment from my marriage, it opens me up to new understandings that even more is possible. And the beauty of seeing new vistas, it's like we took our whole family on a trip to Scotland a couple summers ago. And we climbed Bean Nang Dang. I'm sure I butchered the pronunciation of that name. It's in Glencoe, one of the highest mountains. We didn't go all the way to the top, but this was one of those climbing experiences where we could see the plateau. Hey, there's the top. And we get to the top and realize, oh, there's another plateau, and there's another plateau. Well, what a wonderful experience, right? In some sense, life works that way with income, with love, with career, with family. We desire to be there, and we get there and we realize there's more there. Well, okay, on one hand, maybe that's frustrating. Oh man, I thought this was it. Well, I don't know about you, Dr. Wakeham. I don't ever want to reach it, because I imagine that's when life is over. And this adventure, as frustrating as it is, because life as a human is full of a lot of glass ceiling experiences. We have these important parts of our life that are so integral to our level of fulfillment and satisfaction. And we know that more is possible. We see that more is possible. We see others have more in this area. We know that we've done work to manifest more in this area. We know that having more in this part of our life not only wouldn't hurt anyone else, it would make our lives and everyone else's lives better. There's no reason we're not on the other side of this glass ceiling in these important parts of our lives. Well, the good news is twofold. One, as I said, your inherited beliefs are currently at work manifesting a version of reality that's not pleasing to you. That is something you can change your beliefs. They are not who you are, right? You and your beliefs are two separate things, although they're melded together in this, experience of being a self. And I forget what the other thing was. Whatever the other thing was very, very important, but not as important as the first thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you'll manifest it soon, and then it'll come out. As we wrap up today, if a listener did want to subscribe to you or potentially purchase a book or, just tap into, all this awesome information, where would they go? And we can certainly put that in the show notes too.
I love that. I appreciate that invitation as well. Thank you, Dr. Wakeham. Probably the best place, let's keep it simple. Manifestthebigstuff.com is my website. So you can find all my books there. You can find my coaching courses there. You can even inquire about individual coaching with me there. You can get access to my blog, my email newsletter, and also my Facebook group for manifestors. All of those ways to engage, you're going to find one, or you'll find probably more than one that fit where you are ready and want to plug in.
So manifestthebigstuff.com with Greg Kuhn. Greg, I just so happy you came on today. We talked a lot about manifestation and, we only scratched the surface, right? So there's so much more to know. And again, I definitely invite the listeners to dig a little deeper into your website and get some of that information and continue down their own path of manifestation and hopefully a more empowered and enlightened mindset. So again, thank you so much for your time. Any final words for the listeners before we hang it up for the day?
One last thing, and that is this, just a word of encouragement. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of successful people, and there's one characteristic that I find running through, and we all share this. I just want to reinforce it. Life is designed to inform us, not define us.
That is a tremendously empowering comment. Couldn't agree more. So again, thank you so much for being on this first episode of season 2. Again, just incredibly enthralling information and just so much more to learn for our listeners and candidly even for myself. So looking forward to engaging more with you over time and continuing down the road of more positive manifestation. Thanks everyone for listening. If you like this podcast, don't hesitate to subscribe, like, rewatch, share. Again, don't hesitate to visit Greg's website so you can dive even deeper into the manifestation wormhole, so to speak. And as always, I'm Dr. Ryan Wakeham, successful entrepreneur and your end game coach. I'm here to teach you how to exist today. Hopefully you took that from today's information so that you may expand tomorrow and create the ultimate end game of your wildest desires. Talk to you soon.